I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It states that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. Again, I want to welcome you here to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. I'm one of your hosts. For the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. I've worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such as X-Men, sort of the Braddocks, Grifter, and for this evening, we will go with Justice League of America. That's where we're going to go. Anyhow, but my current love is my t-shirt company, Kirby Tees. You can check out what we've got to offer over there at kirbytees.com, as well as possibly consider purchasing a Retro Rogues Live shirt and supporting what we're doing here on the show. And we would greatly appreciate your support. But enough about that. I want back to my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Well, first off, I want to mention I'm actually wearing a Kirby tee right now. Let's see if we can actually see any of the graphics there. That's from the, the Northern Arizona Cartoonists Association, right?
Yeah,
you're a member of, Dave.
Yeah.
I even got the little stripe here. This is from the Battleboro shirt that you sent me, which you actually made from Kirby Tees. So I like to tell everybody, we sell out to ourselves on this program. Kirby Tees is Dave's company. And I myself am the chief financial officer of a small company in Arizona called Bad Bob Productions. And I also go by the moniker Bass God 14. That's not Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, like a bass guitar. And in my duties as a chief financial officer of Bad Bob Productions, I really had a kind of exciting weekend. And Dave, I think you know a little bit about it because I did mention to you that our mutual friend, Russ Emanuel, who has actually been a guest on the show, came and visited me so that he could go to the Chandler International Film Festival, which my understanding is it's one of the few festivals, basically since the pandemic started, it's one of the few festivals in North America that actually had a physical festival this year. And I feel like Chandler really did it right because Chandler had all three options. They had a drive-in program, so you could actually watch some movies at a drive-in type format where they basically took a parking lot and made it into like an impromptu drive-in. They had the online option, which most, I think, film festivals right now that are actually still going, they're exclusively online. And then they actually had a theater option. You could actually go see all the different films that they had selected for the film festival at the Harkins Chandler Fashion Square. Or Chandler Fashion Mall is what they call it. Yeah. For the Harkins over in Chandler, Arizona. So it was a lot of fun. I did get a chance to see Routine on the big screen. And for those that you don't know, Dave actually worked on the film Routine. Routine is a micro short. It's about 5 minutes long. It was directed by Russ Emanuel. And it takes place in the same universe as another film called Staycation. And Staycation is a film that I worked on back in November in Burbank. We actually filmed it at a studio over there in Burbank in November under all the COVID guidelines, which were very, very strict. And as a result of those guidelines, we basically went way over budget because the guidelines were very, 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 very extensive. As a result of the production going over budget, Russ went ahead and started a Indiegogo campaign. And so I did want to share the latest from that. This is going to be probably the second to last update. But this is going to be the last update where you can still contribute because we won't be back on the air until next Wednesday. And there are only 3 days left in this campaign. And I just want to say I am so proud of this campaign because this film is being done in association with Bad Bob Productions. It's going to say that when this film comes out, it's going to say, like a, Russ Emanuel film, in association with Bad Bob Productions. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the work that we did on this film. And I'm very proud of this campaign. The goal of this campaign was $20,000. At this point, it is now at $31,699 with 406 backers. And hanging out with Russ, it was really good to be able to talk to him about, get kind of that insider knowledge, of this project and everything like that, because we really crushed it. And I'm really proud of him. And I'm really proud of everybody involved with it because first of all, getting to that goal of 20,000, making that goal, even if it's a flexible goal, it's so important to a production that you look good when you make that goal, right? And then on top of that, we got up to that $25,000 and then $30,000, which Russ was really hoping for, because we actually sold cameos in this movie. And in order to fulfill that perk, we have to film those people, and filming costs money. So we did actually need that extra $10,000, $30,000 was really what we actually needed after it came down to all the perks that were sold, because we didn't know how popular those perks were going to be. We didn't know how many people would actually want to be in the film. And there were a lot of people that wanted that perk. So it's great to have that cushion. So now we can film those people and we can actually fulfill those perks. And another big thing that I know Russ was really happy about is that today, actually, it crossed the 400 number of backers. So we got 406 backers, which is really nice, because it's like, basically now we have like 406 like rabid fans that are actually invested in this project. And this is an independent project. And that's a really big deal when you're doing something that's independent. And then I just want to, like I said, there's only 3 days left in this campaign. So if you want to join this winning team and be involved with this production that features actors like Olivia Dabo, Sean Kenny, who played the disabled Captain Pike in the original Star Trek, Tracy Coco, who was in so many different iterations of Star Trek, especially The Next Generation. It feels like she was almost in every scene after a certain season. And we have others, people associated with The Exorcist, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, all sorts of people, plus all sorts of normal people that just decided to join us on this journey. And one of the perks I like to tell everybody about is the $11 perk. So if you're simply curious about the film when it comes out, you'll get a download of the film for $11. So once the film is completed, you'll go ahead and you'll be able to check it out. There's also some great rewards as far as like getting on IMDb. You can get like an IMDb credit for $27. That's really important if you're interested in getting into the industry. You really want to have that IMDb credit. And I know people, especially on the indie end, who struggle getting an IMDb credit, because sometimes IMDb can be a little bit weird if you're a new filmmaker as far as giving you credit for your film. There's a t-shirt you can get for $30. And then also Routine, which I was just talking about. That was the film that Russ was screening in Chandler, Arizona at the Chandler International Film Festival that I got to see on the big screen, Routine. And I have to tell you, Dave, your artwork looked amazing on the big screen. And Russ himself was a little nervous about that because he wasn't sure if the process had been rendered well enough to actually look good on the big screen. And I can tell you personally, it looked great, Dave. It looked great on that big screen. But if you are curious about that film Routine that Dave did work on and features his beautiful artwork, you can actually see that for $51. And you actually, it's one of those stacked rewards. You get like a social media shout out. You do get a download of Staycation. You get a download of the script. You do get an IMDb credit with like a thanks. You get a signed poster. So you get other things for that $51 if you get the Routine prequel. And then finally, the one that I always like to push also is a $57 perk where you get the actual DVD. For those of us that are like me that are analog, we're physical. We want a physical copy of the movie. So for $57, you can get a physical copy of the movie. And as I mentioned, there are other rewards available that go all the way up. There's actually interesting. Red Lobster is a sponsor of ours. So there's actually a reward where you can get a Red Lobster gift card in addition to all the other perks that come with that particular perk at $60. But there's also stuff, like I mentioned, where they have things like cameos. One of the more interesting ones I thought was that you can name a character in the film for $150. I thought this was a really interesting idea. That basically you can kind of be part of the creation process and you actually get to name a character in the film. So there's lots of perks that are still available. And once again, and I'm not sure if you realize this, Dave, but Staycation was actually nominated as best horror short at the Chandler Film Festival.
Oh, I think you mean Routine was, right?
Routine. I'm sorry. Routine was. Yes. Routine.
Yeah.
Routine screened at the Chandler International Film Festival. And it was actually nominated for best horror short. It didn't win, but I think that's really awesome. And that's a feather in your cap, Dave, because you're so involved with that film.
Very cool. Yeah, and as I like to tell people, support independent creators, support independent film. Here's an opportunity to contribute, and help make this film a reality. Get it over the finish line and get it out there where people can watch it. No, yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. Routine's been doing really well, actually. On the film circuits, where Russ has been entering it, and it's really kind of cool to see the film continuing to kind of move and kind of make waves and people taking notice of it. It's really cool. So
and I have to say, time and time again, I feel very strongly that one of the reasons that Routine, which again is just a micro short, it's like less than 5 minutes long, one of the reasons it's gotten so much attention and it has already won awards is, so this was a film that was done under quarantine. Okay, not under the COVID rules. Like, for instance, Staycation was filmed under the SAG COVID regulations, which were extensive. But Routine was filmed in the middle of the lockdown. Okay, and a lot of people were trying to film the lockdown and trying to figure out how to do that. And what I think is so interesting about Routine is, unlike so many other films that basically took that found footage approach. In fact, I did a film myself called Connection Established, which is on my YouTube. And that's the approach I took. I basically actually used StreamYard to film the film. And I tried to do something on that found footage kind of genre. Routine didn't do that. Instead, what Routine did is they had one actor, right? And it's just one actor in a room. All right. So there's one person there and the cameraman. That's it. Right. And they filmed the actress. And then in order to basically do the third act of the film, it was Dave's artwork. So it's Dave's artwork actually tells the story. We had this discussion when Russ was on the show. Was just like, it's like what Dave did. No, it's not concept art. You know what I mean? No, it's not like post credit, art or whatever, like you see in so many other movies. This art actually helps tell the story. Without it, the story is not complete. So I think that's really important. I feel like it kind of puts it in a different category of sort of like an experimental film. And I think that's one of the big reasons it's got a lot of attention.
Well, that's nice of you to say. It's just fun to be a part of the project. And, since, we've been working together, Eric, I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of fun, film projects. And this is all just a lot of fun, exciting stuff for me. You know what I mean? So I'm glad to see that people are enjoying it. I'm glad to see that the end credit sequence works. You know what I mean? I thought it was an interesting idea, and then the irony of ironies, I still haven't seen Routine. So
yeah, exactly. I really wish you'd been able to come, because it really was a fun event. And I'm also glad that Russ and I went to the awards presentation, even though Routine didn't win. I still think it was a lot of fun going, and it was really interesting to see like the quality of people that they put together in terms of just the presenters. It's like a who's who of Chandler. It's really interesting how that particular, because I actually went to that festival the first year it came out. And the first year it came out, they screened Occupants, which of course you and I worked on the Occupants comic book tie-in, and they screened Occupants, and it was basically like a wedding hall. It was a very small event. And now seeing what it is today and seeing like this kind of like who's who of Chandler, in terms like one of my friends, Mark Stewart, who's the vice mayor of Chandler, he was one of the presenters of the awards. You know what I mean? So that kind of gives you an idea of what they put together there. It's actually, I think, even surpassed in my mind the Phoenix Film Festival, which is the #1 festival in terms of attendance, in Arizona, at least pre-COVID, right? So it's kind of interesting to me what they've done. I think they've made a lot of good decisions. It's a really neat event. You get to meet a lot of different people. There were a lot of filmmakers there because there's nowhere else for them to go. I mean, nobody else is really doing physical events. So we had people there from Texas, Germany. I mean, obviously lots of people came in from California, so it's kind of neat to see that. And, it was a really interesting, fun event. And then Jane had mentioned earlier, she's in the house, and she said, that's awesome, Eric, as far as the campaign, and we appreciate that. And she said, I consider it a privilege to be part of Staycation, and we really appreciate your support, Jane. We really do. I mean, and I can say that directly from Russell as well, because when Russell and I weren't out at the film festival, or like maybe going to dinner or something like that, The entire time he was here, he was on his computer talking to people that had contributed to the campaign, whether he was trying to, get people to join the campaign, or he was basically saying thank you to people who actually did join the campaign. I mean, that's just like what he was doing the entire time he was here. So I know he values your contribution very much as well. And again, so do I, because my name's going to be all over this thing.
Very cool. Very cool. Are we good to go ahead and get into the show?
Into the
just
meat and potatoes?
Yeah. So for tonight's episode, obviously our main topic is going to be the new episode of WandaVision. I want to do this just real quick. I had promised, and I don't feel like being on cam tonight, so my apologies. But I had promised last week that we were going to go ahead and start doing the contests again. So for this evening, please comment into the Rogues Gallery. And actually comment on the topic. We have a comment in there right now that is kind of pointless and stupid. That doesn't count. But if you actually comment on the actual topic of what we're doing this evening, then you'll be entered into a drawing. And at the end of the
spam doesn't count.
Spam doesn't count. Spam doesn't count in the contest. I'm very sorry. Spam does not count. But if you actually, put a real comment in there, then we're gonna enter you into the drawing to possibly win a prize. After the show, Eric and I will go through, see who commented. And then we're gonna draw basically it's a little Hulk Halloween candy holder thing I usually use. But we pull a name basically out of a hat, and that person wins a prize. So for this evening, this will be the prize this evening. This is Captain America: What Price Glory. This is actually episode 2 of 4, and this is signed by legendary comic artist Steve Rude. So this will be the prize for this evening. This signed comic book by Steve Rude. I'm going to put it back in the bag now so that it doesn't get damaged. But that basically, you don't have to do anything other than just comment in the comment section tonight. And for doing that, you're going to be entered into a contest to possibly win this signed comic book by Steve Rude. And that's all you got to do to be entered into the contest this evening. How cool is that?
Cool. And as I've mentioned before, Steve Rude is someone that I've known actually for many years. I don't know if he remembers me, but I used to interact with him all the time at the at various actually comic conventions, and I love his artwork. I've always thought his artwork is fantastic. He does great stuff. So that's I think that's a real treat for folks, or it should be a real treat for folks. If you're not familiar with him, I'm telling you, he does good stuff.
And that's what we're going to be doing, kind of moving forward. We're going to alternate and get the prize contests going again. I've got a couple different things I still need to put into the mail. Apologies, but we're going to start doing that as of tonight. We're going to kind of alternate. So one show will be giving away a signed comic book. Next show will actually be a sketch card that I'll do. Like we have been doing before. And eventually what we're working up to is actually, maybe once every, 2 or 3 months or whatever, once I start getting graded and slab books in, we'll occasionally actually give away one of those. But that's kind of a pricey thing. So that's not going to be very often, but it'll be every once in a while. And I'm actually thinking that those, if I can work it out with CGC and get that to work, I'm thinking that'll be a book I'll actually sign that I actually worked on. So it'll be like a Superboy and the Legion of Superhero comics, or it'll be a Grifter comic, or it'll be a comic I actually worked on that's, legitimately, author, like CGC will certify that I signed it, and it'll be slabbed and, graded and that kind of thing too. So that's what we're kind of working up to eventually kind of down the road. But I think that'll be kind of fun for people. But again, Steve Rude signed Captain America comic for this evening. So that's kind of fun. Again, just comment in the Rogues Gallery, basically comment in the comment section where you are. Again, it's only those for this evening. Obviously, when this show actually posts up on YouTube for posterity, that doesn't count. It's just during the live show itself. Please be in the United States. That just makes it easier on me on shipping. And again, actual real comments. Spam does not count for the contest.
And speaking of which, I just put out my link for the Indiegogo campaign. So that's That's not considered spam. That's coming from me.
Right. Yeah. That's not the spam comment we're talking about. Okay, so again, the main topic for tonight's show, we are talking about the latest episode of WandaVision on Disney Plus. I'm going to read, and it's interesting because now we actually have show titles. Because before it was just episode 1, episode 2. So apparently the title for episode 1 was filmed before a live studio audience. The title for episode 2 was Don't Touch That Dial. And this episode's title is actually now in color. And ironically enough, or unironically enough, it was in color. The summary basically states, Wanda's pregnancy causes her powers to misfire as she and Vision prepare for an accelerated delivery. Okay, so we're going to start off with not getting into spoilers, just talking about our initial impressions of this particular episode. So again, just spoiler-free, just general impressions as we're going to start with. And then after that, we'll put up the spoiler warning, and then we'll actually get into the nitty-gritty and kind of guess about what in the hell we think's going on. All right, so Eric, why don't you go ahead and go first? What were your initial impressions of this episode of WandaVision?
So it's interesting because what I said last week after watching the first 2 episodes was I felt this whole series is only going to go one of 2 ways. It's either going to be kind of crazy and mysterious and weird and a little bit frustrating, and then eventually there's going to be this great payoff at the end where you're like, oh wow, I went through all that and this is great what happened, or it's just going to be a colossal mess. It's just going to be a complete waste of time where you're sitting there like, what the hell did I just watch? And not in a good way. And I feel that even more now, but I'm starting to feel the other way. So what I said last week with the first 2 episodes is that I'm not doing very well with the B stories. Okay. I'm not liking it. I know there's a lot of people out there that love it. In fact, one of the points that I tried to make, and I've already seen this without looking for it, by the way, it's just showing up on my feed already. People are starting to say, wow, I don't want the show to get away from the kooky, kind of sitcom format stuff because that's what I'm liking. So if you like that, I think that you're going to have some problems as this show continues. Whereas me, I'm on the opposite side. I don't give a crap about the B stories. I think they suck so far. Okay, because I am a huge sitcom guy, and I really feel Dave and I even talked about this off the air last time because I kind of like it kind of just came out and I kind of realized what the problem is. I really feel the writers are really slacking with the B stories, with the sitcom format. I feel like it's a parody of a sitcom, and instead the writers should have just written a good sitcom. Crazy idea, huh? That's just what I think. I feel like they should have just written good episodes of Dick Van Dyke, a good episode of Bewitched. You know what I mean? A good episode of The Brady Bunch. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they should have done. And I think instead what they did is they're writing spoofs of those things. And to me, it doesn't work. It's lazy because it's like, oh, well, we don't have to really put a lot of work in these B stories because we have a much more important A story, which is, why are they here? What's really going on? What's real? What's not? Who's real? Who's not? That stuff I'm enjoying. I'm enjoying that actually a lot. And I felt this episode cranked it up to 11 as far as what I like, because we got a big reveal. There's we kind of now have a much better idea, I think, in my opinion, of what's going on. And that's the fun I'm having with this show, is that A story and really just trying to figure out, what the heck is going on? Why are they there? Whereas, again, the B story stuff, the sitcom stuff is not working for me. What about you, Dave?
I have been trying to figure out how exactly I was going to talk about my initial impressions of this episode. So I would say, that's my entire impression. I don't know. Because the problem is I've actually been going out and looking at the rumor mill and trying to figure out what might be going on. And I was expecting a much, much larger reveal, like a huge, crazy thing to actually happen.
You did not think it was a big reveal. That's interesting.
No, because we know from the trailers some of this stuff was going to be happening anyway. And And I just was expecting something different. I can't get into that until we get into the spoiler part, of the conversation. But I was expecting this big, huge, crazy, awesome thing to happen, and it was gonna like confirm some other things I'd been hearing, and I was gonna be all like, But instead, like, yeah, I don't know. I still don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, I kind of get it. I kind of don't get it. I actually, I've been sorting through my comic collection because I'm getting ready. I've been talking about this show. I'm going to start pressing and cleaning books, and I'm going to start selling actually a fairly decent sized portion of my collection in order to use the money to pay for some other things and whatever. And then some of those things that I have duplicates or triplicates of, those are the things we're going to be giving away here on the show. And I just I went through and because I am one of those weird people. I am an owner of the Vision and Scarlet Witch miniseries from like the late 70s, 80s or whatever, the original one, the 12-issue miniseries that Marvel did way back in the day. That was the introduction of them like having a house together, the introduction of the twins, the whole thing. And I actually own a lot of the actual original comic books that actually led into that too. Stuff that happened in Avengers and also stuff that happened in Marvel Fanfare and such on and so forth. So I was looking at a lot of those as I was going through my collection and figuring, okay, I'm gonna keep this, sell this, keep this, sell this. And I specifically flipped through a lot of my not my Wanda, but my Vision Scarlet Witch comics and the stuff that I know they're not specifically pulling from that, but I was curious, is any of this
kind of similar? So what was that series called? Was it a Wanda series or was it Vision series?
No, it was Vision and Scarlet Witch.
It was called Vision. It's called Vision and Scarlet Witch.
Yeah. If you can vamp for a second, I'll go grab one.
Okay, that's pretty interesting because I wasn't aware that was a thing. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've never really gotten into any of the Scarlet Witch or Vision comics myself. These characters are, I'm aware of them because I used to see things like action figures, and I'm aware of the look. But as far as actually reading the books, I don't think I've ever read any comic book that featured either one of the characters. And I've mentioned before that my comic collecting, especially when I was little, when I was young, mostly what I got was licensed stuff. I got G.I. Joe and Transformer comic books. That was the basis of my comic collecting and reading as a kid. And I always thought the G.I. Joe comic books were so much better than the cartoon. Whereas most of the superhero stuff that I was into, it was things like the Super Friends cartoon for DC. It was things like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. In fact, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends introduced me to so many different Marvel characters. And in a lot of ways, those are like the definitive versions of the characters for me, because the first time I saw them was on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Because Iceman was a X-Men, they would have the X-Men come on the show sometimes, and you'd get to see all of them in action. So I had no idea that there was a comic book where Vision and Scarlet Witch were living together. I didn't know that. So that's really crazy to me. And I have to think at least some of this show must be drawing off of those comics. I don't know. I'm very curious. I'm definitely very curious. And I don't know if Dave has come back yet, because I'm waiting, I think the same as the audience, to see what this is all about, because I had no idea this was even really a thing. I didn't know that they did that. And it's kind of interesting to me that there's a similar format, at least in terms of the fact that, the two of them living together, I assume as a couple, and having twins. I didn't know they had twins. I didn't know that was a thing either, because Vision's a robot, right? So how does that work exactly? That's kind of weird. That's also a question, I guess, in the series itself. Is how does that work? How does Vision have kids? That's kind of a strange thing, isn't it? So, let's see. Is Dave still going there? Do I still need to keep tap dancing here? So, got any comments from the Rogues Gallery? Has anybody been? Obviously we're trying to stay spoiler free right now, but
I'm still looking. Sorry, I thought I knew where it was. Let me keep looking. I thought I was just sitting in this one pile, but it wasn't. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. So If anybody does have a comment, obviously we are trying to stay spoiler free right now and just talking about initial impressions, as far as anything you might have thought about WandaVision episode 3 now in color. And, I'll re-emphasize my position again. I've said it multiple times, but I'm really having a problem with these B stories, with the episodic parts of the series. I just don't feel they're up to par. Episode 1 is supposed to be kind of like a Dick Van Dyke episode. I watched Dick Van Dyke last night, and I'm telling you, that was not up to par to Dick Van Dyke. People compare it to Bewitched. I'm not as big of a Bewitched fan, but I remember Bewitched being a little bit better than I always seen with, like, say, the second episode in the talent contest, right? And then we have the most recent episode. Obviously, the premise it's set up in episode 2. They're gonna have a kid, right? Because at the end of episode 2. They were actually pregnant, so that's not spoiling episode 3. And I just don't feel like the sitcom formats are working that way. Hey, but John has a different opinion, and I'm happy to share it. So, John McClay, thank you for coming back. And you said it's magic. It's magic, and I assume you mean the entire show in general is magic, because I do recall you giving a very positive comment last week about the show and that you were really enjoying it. And then Jane says, I wonder if the twins can pass through walls too. And that is actually kind of an interesting fan thing, I think, when you talk about the progeny, the children of superheroes. And if they are mixed, whether they're mixed with a superhero and a regular person, like let's say Superman and Lois, there's a big debate there, right? What would that kid actually look like? Because they'd be half human and half Kryptonian. And in this case, you would have a child that is half witch, right, and half robot. So I don't know. Again, I don't know how that works. That is a crazy fan debate right there, because I do not understand how that works. How you can have children with a robot. And actually, minor spoiler. That is actually something that they touch on in the episode. I remember there's actually kind of a line where Vision is kind of like kind of perplexed himself, right? He's kind of like, how does this happen exactly? Because he does know he's a robot, right? They didn't take that away. That's still part of the show. So, Dave, I'm going to have to call this. So you need to find this, or we need to move on, man. I hope you're listening, because, I think we need to kind of keep this rolling along, Dave.
Sorry, any progress? Sorry, I found one. Sorry, they weren't where I thought they were. Okay, so this is issue 2. I thought they were all in the same stack, but they weren't. But this is issue 2. This is the Vision and Scarlet Witch, and this is kind of the interesting thing. I was talking about the opening credits. There's a teaser for this character called the Reaper. This guy in blue over here. This is actually This is actually the Reaper. And there's a connection to Wonder Man right here. There's a lot of fan theories going on about Wonder Man right now in relation to the show. Obviously, this is...
Can you pull it down a little bit so we can see the title? So It's called Vision and Scarlet Witch, and it says a 12-issue limited series.
Yep. And this is issue 2. This is the dramatic conclusion of the crossover that happened in West Coast Avengers. Let's see. When did this come out? 1985. So 1985, wow. 12 issues. I have all 12 issues. I thought they were in one place, but this book was pulled aside as a possible slab book, actually, and I'm considering that. So that's why this wasn't where I thought it was. And then the other ones, I guess, got stuck in another stack. So again, my apologies. But the thing about this series,
so you do have issue 1, issue number 1.
I have issue 1 too. That one is set aside to be slabbed, but I must have done something with it. I'm not sure. It's kind of weird because I tore the studio apart doing this. I'm trying to see, because the other one I was looking at the other day was really interesting, because the people, the citizens of the town, it was like a zombie kind of thing, and Scarlet Witch was actually training with Agatha Harkness, learning how to use magic, and there was actually like a thing that took place actually with Doctor Strange, and she was actually training with Doctor Strange too, and her outfit had kind of slightly changed, and she was going back to the house, and the citizens of the town actually kind of zombified and were like trying to attack her and stuff. And it was kind of like a Salem witch trial kind of thing. They kind of play with those ideas a lot. So anyhow, the point
that would be interesting if that happened in the series, actually.
Yeah, it would be. So I specifically looked at all these comics and was kind of skimming them and trying to go, okay, but what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that in relation to the show? And I don't think they're drawing a lot from this particular series. But I do know it's a big deal for comic book fans. So I know at least some of the initial inspiration came from it, because that was the one where they had a house and they were trying to be domestic, you know what I mean? And be a couple. And then, Scarlet Witch was pregnant with the kids, and there was concern about what's the deal with the kids, how can Vision and, Scarlet Witch have kids. And then at one point, actually, in this series too, Vision actually turned essentially almost human and was believed to be human. And so it's interesting.
Did they address in that series, because that's not a spoiler, right? Did they address in that series how it is that they're able to have kids?
Yeah, the long and the short of it is, as John actually said, as I was over here going through the comic boxes, it is magic essentially. Basically, Wanda basically wills the children into being, and then eventually, and I wonder if they're going to do this in the show or not, because
so does that mean that he's not really their father then?
Well, he's sort of their father, but not. It's Wanda's magic that basically manifests them and makes them real. And then eventually it's also her magic that kind of undoes them and makes them go away. So that's
what that comment meant, huh? So
yeah.
I did not understand, John. I'm guessing you actually read that series. And again, I wasn't even aware it existed. Sorry.
And again, this is an older series. I don't know if they're going to pull that much from it, but I just scanned them just out of curiosity.
Well, that part I could see maybe being in there, right? I mean, I could see. And then also I'm curious about the town turning on them. That kind of seems like an interesting idea too.
Well, and I was curious too, because there's a lot of talk about that Vision might not be who we think he is. And there's a lot of belief that he might lead to another. Anyhow, we got to get into the spoilers.
Yeah, let's just do it. So. Let's just go. We're going into spoiler talk. We're going into
spoiler talk. Let's get into it. Okay, so the reason I was looking at these issues was numerous, but one of them was the fact that there is a lot of talk. Well, I'm going into rumor. Let's talk spoilers and then get into rumor. Okay, so in this particular episode, I think, of course, there's a lot of things that happen that are like a big deal. Amongst them, obviously, is the fact that Wanda actually gives birth, right, to the kids. That's a big deal, right? Big, huge deal. Another big reveal from this episode is the fact that Geraldine turns out to maybe not be, what at least she's trying to present to Wanda anyway. And of course, we mentioned in the last episode that we kind of know that that's actually supposed to be Monica Rambeau, who, when I was reading comic books back in the day, that was the Captain Marvel I grew up reading. She was actually the leader of the Avengers at that time. And this is back in the 80s, everybody. So I'm just putting that out there. I know there's a big push for certain things, but I just want to let you know that Captain Marvel was in charge of the Avengers when I was a kid growing up. She was one of the major characters in the Marvel superhero role-playing game.
And I have no idea who that character is.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
no clue whatsoever. I did not read these comics as a kid. I just didn't.
Well, I will for next episode, I will pull them in advance so they're sitting off to the side, and I'll walk you through the rumor mill that people think is going on with this show. If we don't get a big reveal that's something else, and I'll show you who these characters are and who they're saying these other characters are connected to. But anyhow, we know that's supposed to be Monica Rambeau, but at the very least, she's working for someone on the outside, because Wanda basically.
Now, which one is Monica Rambeau? Which character is she in WandaVision?
Geraldine, the lady who shows up. The one in the white and the blue, she shows up and she's all like, "Hey, I got a job," and they're like kind of hanging out. And she actually delivers one of the kids.
The character I pictured right now.
Yep. That's Geraldine. In the show anyway. And the belief is, or the almost known theory or whatever is, that this is actually Monica Rambeau. She is the little girl actually from the Captain Marvel movie. That and that basically she probably has powers. She's gone by a lot of different names in the comics. When I was growing up, she was basically at that time she was the new Captain Marvel.
Which little girl in which movie?
Okay, so the Captain Marvel movie that has Brie Larson in it.
Oh, I didn't see that one. Okay.
That's okay. All right. Confused. Anyhow, yeah. Well, she's in that movie. They kind of set her character up.
Okay.
And anyhow, when I was reading the comics, she was Captain Marvel. Okay, this was Captain Marvel when I was a kid. Okay, that's who this character was. Now, I don't think they're going to go that route, obviously, because they have all other plans, because they've got the Miss Marvel show in production, and Brie Larson's still signed on to do more movies. So I don't think they're going to go that route. I'm just pointing out the fact that not only was she Captain Marvel when I was a kid growing up, but she was the leader of the Avengers when I was growing up reading comic books. And she was a major component and one of the major players of some of the gameplay scenarios, the different, that you would actually play with the game. She was one of the major heroes because she was the leader of the Avengers, even in the original Marvel Superheroes role-playing game. So it's a major character, okay? So I was expecting something to happen with her. So after she, helps deliver the kids, she kind of reveals that she knows a little bit more about what's going on. And then Wanda basically shoots her.
Let's get specific here. I feel like you're kind of dancing around some stuff, and I want to talk about it.
We'll get into it.
So first of all, this character is really interesting to me in terms of some of the revelations that happen in this episode. So let's back it up a little bit. The first thing that happens is there's the incident with the neighbors where one of the neighbors is literally cutting into the wall of Wanda and Vision's house. And he's like cutting the hedges, and then he starts to cut into the wall. It obviously means something, right? It feels like he's trying to break into something or something like that. Something is going on, and that there's some significance to that. Meanwhile, I think it's his wife, right? That's the character that shows up on the, in the yard or whatever. She starts talking about this character, and she says this character doesn't have a home. That's kind of like as far as she gets. She wants to say more because Vision understands something is wrong. And I find that entire sequence really fascinating because in my mind, this goes back to one of the things we were talking about before last week was like, is this like a simulation or is this really happening in like some sort of alternate reality? And there's a question about that. And I feel like the big question for me about that is, okay, well, we know Vision's dead. So in my mind, he has to be a simulation. But this episode kind of throws that all on its head because Vision seems very self-aware. And it's Vision who's questioning what's going on. In fact, in an earlier sequence, he actually starts to say things where he's all like, "Hey, remember about my boss choking, and remember about what happened, and with the he starts bringing up these different weird things, right? That don't seem to make sense. It's like Vision is specifically questioning this reality, right? And every time he does that, Wanda kind of like throws him back. Like basically like we'll kind of like reverse time or whatever and make him kind of reboot. You know what I mean? Because he's like becoming too self-aware. Now, the interesting thing here is, and I'm so glad you told me to, you mentioned Legends and I hadn't watched it and I forgot things. And Legends does a good job of kind of, making you remember, well, who the hell is Vision, right? Well, Vision essentially at his origin is Jarvis, right? He's Jarvis. He's the AI from Tony, and in the Legends sequence or whatever, they actually have a line. I can't remember which character says it. I think it's actually the Hulk. I think it's actually Banner who says this, and he talks about maybe Vision can survive without the crystal. Because maybe those are actually the best parts of him. And specifically, he talks about Ultron, Jarvis, of course. And I think he says, and Tony. And Tony. He says the best parts of Vision are actually not the crystal. It's Ultron, Jarvis, and Tony. So now I have this kind of new kind of theory because obviously Vision is an AI, right? He is based on Jarvis, who is an AI, who's also based on Tony, and then of course, that kind of evolved into Ultron. I think there's something to that basically that Wanda has somehow been able to salvage some piece of that, and that AI is operating in this weird world, and every time he becomes like too self-aware, she throws him back. Because that whole sequence, it seemed like he was really trying to realize something is wrong here. Something's wrong with that lady. Something's wrong with why is he chopping down the wall? You know what I mean? And he's kind of putting it together. And every time that happens, Wanda has to throw him backwards again, almost like erasing his memory because he is an AI. I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, that's definitely what's happening. And the big thing from that scene too, and we'd seen that before, is that it does appear as if Wanda is not basically in charge of all this, creating this, manipulating this scenario that we're seeing for whatever purpose, whether it's to protect the people in the town, as John theorized the last episode, whether it's just Wanda playing out this wish fulfillment fantasy that her and Vision can be together, whatever the reasoning being, very clearly Wanda is able to influence what is happening and at times directly control what is happening. And we're seeing that basically in every episode, that she's able to kind of snap, basically, wish or conjure into being whatever she wants to have happen. So I wasn't too shocked or surprised at that. But in this episode is the episode where we realize that that we're getting a sequence of events. So we know this obviously has happened after the events of Ultron. Like, we kind of know that, but at least we're getting confirmation of this information. And then secondly, too, is that whenever people start bringing this stuff up in a context in which makes Wanda unhappy, she does things. And that's a big deal, because I actually saw a theory video where someone was saying that they believe that Wanda may actually be the villain of this series. And that's why we haven't, quote unquote, seen a villain yet, because maybe Wanda Maximoff is actually the villain of WandaVision, and we just haven't, seen that yet. And her manipulation of this scenario, I don't know. We'll have to see, but no, I think it's interesting to see that definitely if she's not in control of the scenario, she can definitely at times control it irregardless.
Well, are you falling on one side or the other with that? Do you believe she's in control or not?
I'm going to be honest with you, Eric. I watched this episode like 4 times. I watched it again last night, and I'm kind of lost. I'm honestly kind of lost. Going through the comic books, trying to figure out what's going on, did not do me any good at all, except maybe go, well, I always liked this book, and I wish they would have done this, and I wish they would have done that. Well, maybe they'll still do this, or maybe they'll. So it didn't do me any good. To be honest with you, I'm probably more lost now than I was last episode. Last episode, I felt like I had a pretty good feel for what's going on. And this episode, like, I don't know. And again, I'm in the same place of my initial reaction last week. It's like, I don't hate the show, but I don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, I have sometimes an inkling of a theory, and we'll get into that. We get into the rumor portion of the speculation portion. But I honestly, I don't know. I don't know. At this point, I'm just watching the show. I'm not going to profess to have any kind of interesting knowledge about what in the hell is going on, because I'm confused. I'm really confused. I don't know. I can tell you that I agree with you, Eric. I feel like at times these sitcom-y aspects of it, that it's almost, and it's weird. I'm seeing this writing in a lot of things. It feels like sometimes it's like fan fiction or too spoofy, and it's like, well, you're writing the real thing. You don't have to write it as if it's a spoof or fan fiction. You're actually working on the show. Just write it as. So I don't know.
That's that is my biggest peeve. If I was the showrunner on this show, I would be telling my writers, hey, just write like an episode of Dick Van Dyke. Okay. That's what I want. You know what I mean? Just write an episode of Bewitched. just write an episode of Brady Bunch, because I feel like this one was going for Brady Bunch, even though the kids aren't quite there yet. The aesthetic was clearly Brady Bunch. You know what I mean? The era was clearly Brady Bunch. So that's what I would be doing with them. You know what I mean? I would be telling them just write it, not straight. I mean, this is still a sitcom, right? We're still talking about sitcom genre. So I'd be just like, just write me an episode. Don't write me the Brady Bunch movie. You know what I mean? Don't write me, a spoof. That's not what I want. You know what I mean? I want just as if you were writing an episode of this particular series. And that's the biggest deficit to me. That's the thing that frustrates me the most with this show, because I love these shows. Like I said, I just watched an episode of Dick Van Dyke last night. There's a network called Decades. I watch it routinely, and they have episodes of Dick Van Dyke every night. And it's so much better than this garbage when it comes to that B story stuff. Just so much better written. The performances are amazing. You see like the physical comedy that Dick Van Dyke was able to achieve because he had just such a masterful control of his body. You know what I mean? And he was just able to do physical comedy that was just amazing. And I'm sorry, these actors just can't do. You know what I mean? Because they're different. They're different kind of actor, right? They're more of the dramatic action type actors. They can't do that stuff. But you could find somebody that could, right? You could have one of the guest stars or somebody that could do that and make it a little bit more interesting, at least in my opinion. But in terms of the A story, I do think we got a lot of good advancement there. Like I feel like I've got a somewhat decent theory of what's going on at this point. Like for instance, I feel like I can say with confidence, at least the town people are not a simulation. They're real people, and they're essentially trapped. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that I wasn't sure about when we talked about it last time. I think John brought it up and was talking about that. But now I'm like firmly convinced the town people are basically real people, and they're trapped. And the reason I say that is because we know this person on screen is a real person.
Right. And she's actually ejected.
She's ejected. She's sent to the cornfield. By the way, did you feel that? She was sent to the cornfield? Yeah. Did you feel that?
Yeah.
I felt that.
It was interesting. And that was kind of a tense moment too, because at first, Wanda's kind of remembering her brother and kind of talking about things and whatever, and they're kind of connecting, kind of clicking. And then she kind of, Geraldine is trying to kind of go, yeah. And she's trying to get more information out of her and whatever, and trying to be kind of sly about it. And then Wanda tunes in pretty quick. And it again, we get that dead stare version that we got in that, episode 2 or whatever, where she's like, no, we get that dead stare version of her. And then you realize it's like, oh, you just said something naughty. You about to get spanked. And so, yeah. And pretty much at that point, we cut to something else. And then when we cut back, she's just not there. And then eventually we find out that basically Wanda essentially kicked her out of the sphere or whatever this is. It's engulfing this town. And it's weird too, because it does go to reinforce some of those fan theories that say that possibly Wanda is essentially the villain of the series. I do want to comment on that, because I don't necessarily think at this point, at least right now, I don't think she's the villain. I just think she's the instigator. She's she's the nexus of it. I don't necessarily know. Well, I don't necessarily think her intentions are hostile, I guess is the best way I can put it. Well, I don't think they're hostile. I'm just saying in terms of antagonist, protagonist, I think that we're at this point, I am probably falling a little bit more on the side of the idea that, whatever she's doing, and it's weird because there are times when it seems like it's for her benefit, but then I also kind of think that there's something to John's theory where maybe she is trying to also protect these people to one extent, and maybe there is something else going on. And when we get into the rumor portion, we can get further into that, because I
think we're pretty much there. But John has a comment actually, and he said that the Twilight episode we invoked, I feel is an apt comparison. And so I think it's important to back up in case anybody's never seen that Twilight Zone episode. There's an episode of the Twilight Zone that actually features Bill Mummy, right, from Lost in Space and also Babylon 5. By the way, we are going to be talking about Babylon 5 later in this episode. And he plays a little boy, who has these incredible powers and has basically taken over his town and essentially eliminated the rest of the world. The rest of the world is gone. And anytime he doesn't like something, he sends it to the cornfield, right? Anytime he doesn't like somebody, that includes people, by the way. But if he doesn't like a toy or if he doesn't like a person, he sends it to the cornfield and essentially kills them, right? That's essentially what happens, right? By the way, there is a successor in the new Twilight Zone to that episode that I actually really like, where they have his daughter. So I won't spoil that for anybody who's never seen it, because I think everybody's seen pretty much that classic episode, The Twilight Zone, but you might not have seen the new Twilight Zone and the follow-up with his daughter. It's actually kind of a neat episode. They do a whole twist on it and everything. Yeah, I feel like that's what's happening. Like, basically, Wanda has taken over this town, and she is Bill Mummy's character in the Twilight Zone, but I don't think she means harm. You know what I mean? That's kind of the difference between, say, her and the Bill Mummy character in Twilight Zone, in my mind.
Well, and it's interesting too, because, you know, when we see, for example, going back to the Legends, Eric, when you watch kind of the recap, which if for those of you who are watching WandaVision that don't remember everything that's kind of led up to this, and you don't want to watch like 10 movies or whatever it is, I rewatched a bunch of those movies just to see if there was something I was missing. But you know, if for some reason you don't want to do that, on Disney Plus, they do have these shows. There's like 2 episodes called Legends. One's about Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. The other one is about the Vision. And it fills in a lot of information. But one of the things that I was always curious about is when Thanos actually rips the stone or the gem or whatever out of Vision's head and kills him, he goes black and white, right? Like all the color kind of goes out of him. And one of the big things that happens is, in the comics anyway, when the twins in the comic books anyway vanish and they go away, during the course of some other events, Vision is killed. And when he returns, he's like kind of emotionless, soulless. He's very much like Data, and he has no color in his costume anymore because he doesn't know what's the point of color anyway. So I'm very curious to see, as we move forward, like, are we going to get a physical manifestation of Vision who is kind of cold and disconnected and not really, you know, associated with, you know what I mean? Very kind of
I
distant.
love that. I told you last time, I love that. I think that's really interesting. And again, it goes back to what is in in Legends, in that line that I talked about, which is what is left of Vision, if anything, right? Is there anything left of Vision? And I would say, they told you right in that Legends thing, because that's what the point of it is. And yes, there is. There's Jarvis, there's bits of Ultron and Tony himself that are still plopping around in that corpse. You know what I mean?
Right. And I'll put forth the crazy theory that I had thinking about all this. What if there's this possibility in this show as we move forward? What if there's the possibility that one of the people trying to get to Wanda is actually this more Data version of Vision, and the version of Vision that exists in this simulation or this delusion or manifestation of her powers that she's creating, that she's manipulating? What if this actually isn't Vision necessarily, that we think of in terms of it being a reincarnated version of the physical form? But what if this is just one that she has created, that's in this kind of pocket universe world that she's created? And what if, and I would be surprised if one of the characters actually trying to get to her turns out to actually be the more Data disconnected, from people version of Vision. And then she may see him almost kind of as an adversary as well, because he's not the person that she fell in love with. He's this other thing. Because I've been really trying to think about who that person was, the beekeeper that came out of that manhole cover, and just putting a lot of templates going, what if it's this person? What if it's this person? And the most interesting theory I've come up with is that, maybe eventually one of the characters who's trying to get in touch with her, it turns out is actually Vision. Right. And that he's nothing like we remember because of the damage that happened when the gem was actually ripped out of his head. But anyhow, to move to talk about the big.
I think that's a really neat theory. I really think that's really interesting. I had not considered that, because I was going more with the idea in my head that really is what's left of Vision, and every time he kind of goes a little too far, she kind of sets him back again. That's kind of where I was going. But I like your idea because I think it's really interesting. And the question I have obviously is, who was on that radio, when he says, guys like, Wanda, who's doing this to you? Who's doing I tried to figure it out in my own head and I couldn't come up with anything, as far as a specific character that I think that is. But the idea that could be Vision himself, whatever's left of Vision, and what we're seeing is not that. That's pretty interesting. That's a neat idea.
I think it's the way to go because, like that cover I showed you, one of the things they always did with the Vision storylines is the template that helped to create Vision, which is actually Wonder Man. Okay, is always kind of brought back in, and then Wonder Man's brother is actually the Grim Reaper, and the Grim Reaper sometimes is always trying to disprove that Vision or whatever isn't really related to him. And it's weird, all these kind of storylines that they do back in the comics with all the different versions of the characters. And so there is always this idea that there is another version of Vision. Sometimes it's a manifestation of someone else, or the template that helped to create Vision is always like an additional protagonist or antagonist that exists in the story. And so I was trying to think about this idea, and I was like, well, this is an interesting concept. And as I watched it, I began to wonder, well, what if this version of Vision that we see in the show, while it does have some awareness, what if it's actually something that Wanda has created that's new, just in the same way that she's creating these children that she's giving birth to? What if this actually isn't Vision? And what if eventually later on the show, we realize that Vision is up walking around, he has his powers and his abilities, but it's very different. And as far as Wanda's concerned, that isn't Vision. That's something else.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting idea. And I really like it. Of course, it does beg the question exactly what the one that I have pictured, what this Vision is. You know what I mean? Is it just... And the thing that's interesting there too is, again, the self-awareness. That's what's kind of making my head spin a little bit. Is like he's very self-aware. He is questioning the reality, and every time he starts to kind of go in that direction, Wanda snaps him back. You know what I mean? Like, no, do not look at the man behind the curtain. You know what I mean? Because he's figuring it out. In fact, even in the first episode, I think they had that discussion where he's all like, wait a sec, we never got married. You know what I mean? Because they never got married. You know what I mean? We never started living like that. Even in the first episode, there was like that conversation where they're kind of like, how did this happen? Because we never did this. You know what I mean? So,
and to push this theory a little bit further, just to put this out there, one of the templates that was used to create Vision in the comic books is Wonder Man. Okay. And Wonder Man, when he's not being a superhero, at one point was actually an actor. Okay. And there's a fan theory floating around out there that some people believe that this manifestation of Vision is eventually going to get us essentially to Wonder Man. And all of a sudden it's like, well, what if this isn't Vision, but this is someone that she has replicated to look like Vision?
That's interesting. I like that. I think that's really interesting. Like, this is an actual real person. It's not Vision. In other words, I like that because that reconciles the problems I'm having right now. So if he's an actual person, a real person that essentially Wanda has just turned into Vision, right?
Right.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And that's why he's questioning things and has that self-awareness as opposed to something she just created, right. I like that idea. I like that theory a lot. I think that's a really intriguing theory, and it kind of fits with some of the stuff I'm thinking and explains some of the little discrepancies in my head that was like,
well, so that and so that's kind of my theory, is that I think we're gonna as the show moves on, I think it's gonna turn out that this version of Vision is different from the actual physical Vision that's actually up walking around. I mean, I really kind of think that. I don't have any real hard evidence other than when I go through the comics. Like I said, it's just a big thing in the original stories is that, there's always Vision and almost like a version of Vision that existed before or existed after. And there's always this conflict between these different things and who is actually this person and who is not actually this person. And well, this is just a robot, but this is the manifestation of the soul. Well, what does that mean? So I think that maybe they're going to play into that concept as we move forward. And I wouldn't be surprised, and it would explain some of the weird TV stuff that's going on. If she's got an actor that she's kind of manipulating and putting through these paces,
Yeah.
it would help explain a little bit about what's going on. But I don't think that's necessarily it. But I just believe that we're going to find out that Vision is up walking around, and it's not actually this particular Vision, and that's part of the disconnect. Because I just would really rack in my head about, well, who is that beekeeper guy? And then the big reveal that I had heard a lot of fan theories about. Let me go ahead and throw this out. This is rumor. There's, as far as I can tell, there's no truth to this. But apparently, the actor who played Quicksilver in the X-Men movies has been cast to play a character in this. At least that's what I've been reading and what I've been hearing. And a lot of people were theorizing that when her brother returned, when basically Quicksilver returned, that it wasn't actually going to be the actor who played him in the movies, but it was actually going to be the actor from the X-Men movies, and that was going to open the door actually to the X-Men kind of walking into the MCU. That he was going to be from an alternate reality, and that was going to open up these doorways, and that was going to begin to cause a lot of what eventually leads to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Obviously, that didn't happen in this episode. Even I'd heard all this crazy stuff that was going to, but I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. That part of my unfortunate disappointment with this episode, I was expecting a crazy reveal. We did get some crazy reveals, but it wasn't kind of on the level of what I was expecting. So that's kind of why my review of the episode, because I don't hate this series, but I'm really confused by it. I don't know what the hell is going on. So at this point, I'm just kind of watching it going, I don't know. So
I would think if that Quicksilver rumor is true, I would think that would be something that would happen in the last episode. That's when they flip the switch, so to speak. And now basically, the X-Men, the Fox X-Men are now part of the MCU, just like that. And it kind of makes sense because we've talked about that in the past, that Scarlet Witch is sort of that bridge, right? And obviously Quicksilver is literally that bridge because he's in both franchises, right?
Exactly.
That was a real big deal when they decided to do that Marvel allowed that they actually allowed two different versions of the same character, right? Because they didn't have the rights at that time to the X-Men. So they shared it, you know what I mean? Which was a really weird and even kind of controversial decision. So that would be a really interesting way to kind of merge the two. Although I guess I'm of two minds about that. In some ways, I kind of feel like, I guess I wasn't a huge fan of New Class. I did like Days of Future Past, but I like that because they brought back like the original cast. So part of me kind of feels like, maybe we should just start over when it comes to the X-Men. Now that we've got the MCU going, let's just get new people. You know what I mean? And get some new blood.
Just because they bring them in, a couple of them in for let's say a couple episodes of WandaVision, and they show up in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. By the end of that movie, the universe is going to have to be reformed. If you take Crisis on Infinite Earths and look at that as sort of like a template, right? Where you had all these different versions of Superman and all these different versions of this and all these versions of that, which is ironic. It's a DC story. That's what I keep talking about. Marvel keeps stealing DC's thunder. But if you imagine that as an idea, as a concept, that maybe that's theoretically, to some extent, what we're going to get in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and it begins here, right? Just because you get this particular version from the X-Men movies of Quicksilver, which he had the best scenes in those movies, by the way. If you get that version of Quicksilver, and again, that's just my opinion, you can have a lot of fun with that character, and it's kind of cool. But at the end of the Doctor Strange movie, the universe is rewritten, and maybe we get an all new version, you know what I mean, of the X-Men characters introduced moving from that point on, but this is just a way to kind of acknowledge that, those characters are kind of around in some fashion.
And then they can always bring them back anytime they want, which is kind of the best of all possible worlds. I totally see that, because I did hear a rumor that Feige was even approaching Patrick Stewart about reprising his role as Professor X. I did hear that was something that was on the table that actually Patrick Stewart right now is not interested in. That's what the rumor that I heard, that Feige did approach him, and he's like, nah, I don't think so, not right now, probably because of that terrible series Picard, who knows. But anyway, that's the rumor I heard. I do think that it would make sense. It makes perfect sense. We've got to get the X-Men into MCU somehow, some way, right? Now, we've never had mutants in the MCU, right? That's not a thing in the MCU, right? So it seems to me, because we do have someone who's supposed to be a mutant, and she kind of is, right? Actually, in a way, she is, except unlike, the mutants in X-Men, which are it's like a evolutionary thing. She was manipulated by the Tesseract, right? And she is a mutant, right? That's how she got her powers in the MCU. It would be interesting to me to kind of make the mutant version of the MCU all dependent upon Scarlet Witch. That basically Wanda is the source of mutation. You know what I mean? That she causes the mutation. Like, one scenario I could think of off the top of my head is somehow she affects the people in the town with what she's doing. And when they finally come out, they're mutants. I think that would be an interesting way to do it.
Well, we'll see. Of course, I know that two of the series are leaning into. One of them is House of M. And then the big end at the end of the House of M storyline is that because of the events that happens, Wanda utters the phrase "no more mutants," and then all of a sudden all the mutants disappear essentially for a period of time. And then some people are hoping that she will utter something that causes mutants to exist, right?
Yeah, it would be the opposite. Exactly.
Right,
it would be like she does the Thanos snap, but instead of taking everybody away, she brings people in. You know what I mean? So
So it'll be interesting to see kind of where this all goes and how, if they, I know that they're looking at that storyline specifically for this particular series, but as it currently stands, like I said, I'm confused by what's going on. But do you have any other predictions of what you think might be coming up here soon, Eric? I mean, I've kind of given you mine.
I think right now what I'm thinking is the trauma of Vision's death has caused Scarlet to create this little utopia for herself. The sitcom thing, I'm not quite understanding. I don't know if they're going to try to go somewhere like, oh, well, she grew up loving these stupid sitcoms or whatever. You know what I mean? It seems a little cheesy to me. I don't know why the sitcom part. Maybe she tried to do something and maybe somebody else actually kind of messed it up. In other words, she had an intention of maybe creating this utopia for herself and maybe Hydra, because we've seen 2 ads from Hydra, right? And of course she was created by Hydra. Maybe somehow they influenced it. So the vision, if you will, got twisted, so it kind of didn't go exactly the way she wanted, because she was trying to create this alternate reality for herself where she could be happy with Vision, and maybe somebody else along the line. And right now I'm just going to say Hydra because they're the only ones we've seen, because we've seen 2 ads from Hydra in this series. Maybe somehow they manipulated it. You know what I mean? So now the Vision is kind of going haywire. You know what I mean? It's not quite going the way that she had intended it to go, but she was the initial instigator.
Well, and along those lines, John's got an interesting theory. If you want to put that up on the screen, he says, "I hope Mephisto is involved somehow, and maybe even that Agnes's mysterious husband Ralph." And that's an interesting idea. And I think we're going to go there, John. To be honest with you, there has been so much talk about somehow that Mephisto is involved in this. Mephisto would make a great villain for the next, Doctor Strange movie, for example. And it brings in so many interesting things that could come about. And I understood what you meant. And Ralph, so John says, "I hope Mephisto is involved somehow. Maybe he is even Agnes's mysterious husband Ralph. Yeah, I understood what you meant. Sorry, I did a horrible job of even cleaning up the comment, but I understood what you meant, John. and I think that
can you talk
too,
about this character, Dave? Because I'm not familiar with this character. So can you just give us a
Well,
little bit of background on Mephisto?
You know more about Mephisto than you realize, because Mephisto is basically the devil, Eric. That's who Mephisto is in the Marvel universe. Mephisto is basically the devil. He's an ultimate manipulator. He's a trapper and torturer of souls. For me, when I think of Mephisto, though, John and Eric, for me, Mephisto is primarily a Silver Surfer villain, because of the role that Mephisto played in tempting and manipulating the Silver Surfer in order to try and obtain the power cosmic from the Surfer. That's how, when I think of Mephisto, I think of him as being a Silver Surfer villain first and foremost in my mind. But he is essentially Marvel's version of the devil. That's basically what he is. And he is a manipulator, just like Satan was. So,
would this open up things to Galactus and stuff like that? Would that kind of open that door?
I don't know if it opens the door to a cosmic idea, but it does lead us back into Doctor Strange's sort of occultic, kind of it's kind of,
which is I think that's where it's going. It's definitely related to Doctor Strange's movie.
I think that's where we're going, but it does eventually introduce Mephisto into the MCU, where eventually he can taunt and torment the Surfer should they choose to go that route. Which the Surfer is the one big Marvel character I'm still holding out for. I want to see the Surfer return, I'm pretty excited about this because it's interesting. I hope they do this stuff, John. I really, really hope they do this stuff. John says he first met him in the Infinity Gauntlet #1. Yes, and so I'm very much hoping they go there, John. I've even seen some fan theories that some people believe that Vision is actually Mephisto. I've seen some crazy stuff on the internet, and I'm talking about just about Marvel stuff. I'm not talking about the other stuff. And I'm very curious to see what they're going to do with this. But that's who Mephisto is, Eric. He is essentially the devil. So
that's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, I think for sure it's obviously going to relate back to Doctor Strange somehow. He's very important in this, but I do kind of hold out hope that what we're going to see is some sort of bridge to the Fantastic Four and X-Men, because obviously we don't have them in the MCU. The X-Men seem the most likely thing to me, because I could just see her, because in a sense, again, she is a mutant. And it's just that the way that they do mutation in the MCU is different than what we're used to in the cartoons, the comics, and the movies, right?
But
it is still mutation,
right? And they could say that the reason that Baron von Strucker was able to even give her the abilities that she has is because she had the mutant gene in her to begin with, and that's why she could even absorb the energy and manipulate the energy from the. I think Vision didn't Vision have the Soul Stone or the Soul Gem?
That sounds right. I mean, that would make the most sense, right?
Yeah, and so it would make sense that she would be able to take that energy in and manipulate it, but she doesn't realize that she can tap into her latent X gene, her actual mutant abilities. You know what I mean? And they can always reveal that down the road, that's why they knew that she would potentially be able to manipulate, the gem to begin with. So I really think, or the stone, I really believe that it's mind. John says mind. My bad. You're correct, John. So yeah, Vision had the Mind Stone. So it makes sense that she would be able to manipulate that energy if she actually had the the mutant gene to begin with and had kind of already the latent abilities. So we'll see. Now that Disney owns essentially the rights to the X-Men as far as doing movies and stuff and everything, is going forward, I think that they're going to begin to clean some of this up and say, oh, well, yes, but also this. And that'll begin to pave the way, you know what I mean, for a lot of these other things. And we'll have to see how they do it. But like I said, my expectations for this episode were kind of mired in the fact that I'd read too many rumor things on the internet, and I was hoping to see Evan Peters show up as Quicksilver. So,
see, and I'm staying away from all that stuff. It still creeps in. Like I said, I still get stuff on my feed. I can't help it. My Google feed is always full of all sorts of crap. I went off on with you the other day about something that's not related to this, where I was just like, why is this stupid stuff showing up on my feed? I don't want to see it.
Right.
I don't support these people. But yeah, the thing that I saw actually was going back to what I was talking about, where some people I think are really digging the cheesy sitcom stuff, right? They're really liking that. Like, that's what they like about the show, and they really don't care why she's there, which I'm mystified by that. I'm just like, really? Seriously, you like cheesy spoofs of sitcoms because you probably don't like real sitcoms if you like this. That's how I feel. You know what I mean? I know it sounds a little hostile, but that's how I feel right now. It's like, you don't really like Dick Van Dyke. You don't really like Brady Bunch. You really don't like Bewitched. You just like cheesy, stupid parodies of those things. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know.
Well, and like I said, I'm not hating the show. I'm just so confused by it. I'm kind of, I don't know. Like, it really kind of, I don't, and that unfortunately is where I'm at, because I can't reconcile the sitcom stuff versus essentially what I consider, which is the main driving narrative, which is, why is Wanda doing all this? Why is this happening? Or as the guy on the radio says, Wanda's who's doing this to you? You know what I mean? Like, that for me, that's what I want to know. And anything that doesn't really kind of move that narrative forward, after a couple episodes of the sitcom thing, has kind of got me a little bit perplexed. But again, that's just because that's how I am, and as a comic book fan, I want to see what comic book things hopefully they're going to introduce, into the series. And it's important to mention too that I'm not too terribly familiar with. I know they're pulling from, I think it's the later Vision series that they did, where it was similar, where you had a family and everything. And I didn't read that series, so I'm a little in the dark on that stuff. But I am familiar with the other stuff, even though I apparently get my facts a little screwed up from time to time. But no, yeah. I think with that, we're probably good to move on from WandaVision. Don't you think, Eric?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've kind of put our theories out there and what might be going on and the direction of the show. I am looking forward to the next episode and hopefully getting some more revelations about what's going on.
And I will set some comics aside next time so I can show these things on the show without trying to dig them out of the box. I apologize. I really didn't think that was going to take as long as it did, so my apologies.
It happens.
Yeah.
Right, cool. This is an unscripted show, folks.
It's live. It's live.
It's live, right? Yeah, it's live.
Yeah, and you and I, we didn't even discuss that. I was just, I had just been going through them, and I was shocked at some of the things and going, oh, it's kind of like that, and it's kind of like this, but it's not too. So, yeah, cool.
Yeah, I always find it interesting when you talk about, whether you talk about the MCU, whether you talk about DC, and whether you talk about Star Wars, because Kathleen Kennedy, there are comics, there is source material, there's all sorts of stuff. It's interesting for me to see what these story groups and stuff, what they steal. You know what I mean? What they mine from the comics. I mean, they're stealing from themselves, right? But it is interesting to see what little bits and pieces they will take from the source material, being the comics in this case, because it's there. I guarantee you that book that you just showed us, it has some influence over this show. Yeah,
for sure. And we know that it does too, because they show the Grim Reaper's helmet in the opening credits for the second episode.
So there you go. That somebody on that writing team is familiar with it. You know what I mean, or was told about. So
yeah, cool. All right, so let's go ahead and move over into pop culture. And we'll just set that up just real quick. So here on the pop culture news segment, we're going to talk about anything that's interesting happening with pop culture news. We always hope it's something that you, our dear valued viewer, our dear valued listener, will find worthy of discussion. That's what we hope that you will pull actually from the pop culture news. So I don't have any pop culture news articles this week, unfortunately. My week has not gone as planned, but I know Eric has got some stuff prepared. So tell us, Eric, what do you have up first for this week's installment of Pop Culture News?
Well, I'm going to start out with some sad news. I always try to start out if I'm going to have some negative stuff or some tough stuff to swallow. I like to start out with that first so that we can, try to end on a higher note. So in between the time of our last broadcast and today, unfortunately, an actor that I admire quite a bit, and any of you who are Babylon 5 fans, this probably affected you at least a little bit, and it's a sad thing. So Mira Furlan passed away during the time that we were off the air. And I found this really neat article from Sci-Fi Wire. And it says, Mira Furlan will always be remembered for this Babylon 5 scene that proved kindness is not the same as weakness. So a little background here, okay? When Babylon 5 first came out, I really didn't support it. I remember watching a few episodes here and there. Ironically, I wasn't all that enthusiastic about Deep Space Nine either. Like, I remember watching the first season pretty committed, and then I started to think this show kind of sucks. A lot of people, even if they're big Deep Space Nine fans, which I am now, the first 3 seasons are a little temperamental, right? And of course, there were always huge comparisons between Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine. And myself, at that time, being a Trekkie, I kind of sided with Deep Space Nine. And I really didn't give Babylon 5 much of the time of day, except every once in a while I would see an occasional episode. We actually did, when we were just a podcast, before we went to the live format and we went to doing the actual visual part of the show, we did a podcast, Dave and I did, that was from his original podcast, which was Rogues Radio, right? Rogues Radio podcast. And we actually did an episode where we compared Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5. And boy, did I bring up a lot of stuff about how much Deep Space Nine completely ripped off Babylon 5. But that is a discussion for another day, and hopefully we will get back to that at some point. But this scene is what's really interesting to me, and the reason I decided to talk about this was this particular scene. I saw it first run. This is one of the episodes I actually watched when Babylon 5 first came out, when it was first run before it got into the the rerun cycle or whatever you're going to call it. I remember watching this scene that they're talking about, and it's a really fantastic scene. And so it says here, in Severed Dreams, the good people of Babylon 5 are forced to leave the Earth Alliance in order to combat the corruption of an autocrat named President Clark. When this happens, all hell breaks loose on Babylon 5. A space station that is, in theory, in neutral territory. A space station literally created so warring planets could have a place to meet and settle their differences. We all know about Star Trek's optimistic future, but Babylon 5 did its own version of it too. In this show, it wasn't just that people were peaceful, but that they were also actively trying to work out their differences. Says, anyway, the big Delenn moment. Delenn was the character that was played by Mira Furlan, okay? So the big Delenn moment. When it looks as though Babylon 5 is going to get crushed by their enemies, Delenn arrives with the Minbari fleet, former enemies of Earth, and delivers an ultimatum that she will protect Sheridan and the space station. Don't you dare test her. Here's what she says. Here's the quote. She says, only one human captain has ever survived battle with a Minbari fleet. He is behind me. You are in front of me. If you value your lives, be somewhere else. And I will always remember the delivery of that line. She had a kind of a thick accent. She was from Yugoslavia. And she had sort of an interesting rhyme and meter of the way she spoke. And I always just will remember that line. Like I said, I remember seeing that episode, first run. I remember thinking, what a badass delivery. Because basically at that moment, Babylon 5 is about to be taken over. Like they're done. They fought the good fight, but basically reinforcements come in from Earth and they're doomed. And she just shows up with the Minbari fleet and she does that line, and I'll just never forget it. So I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of a tribute to her and say that, this is a show that I initially didn't support, but I've become a big fan of it since. So, Dave, I don't think you've really gotten much into Babylon 5. I don't know if you had any other comments about the passing of Mira Furlan.
No, I didn't watch a lot of Babylon 5 back in the day. I'd mentioned that before when we actually covered it on the show. That was actually the first time I'd actually had really sat down and actually, focused on actually those episodes. There is some news we'll get into later in relation to Babylon 5. And I actually want to talk to you about
Big
the
news.
possibility. Yeah, and I actually want to talk to you about the possibility of us actually going back and actually revisiting maybe episodes of Babylon 5 actually for the Retro Rogues Live. I think that'd be something to discuss and maybe actually talk about on the show. So no, I didn't have a particular connection to this character other than I saw a lot of fond remembrances and people talking about her passing. And it seems as though she was quite beloved amongst the fandom and Babylon 5 is one of those shows that continues to be talked about because of not just the writing but also the performances, and I did enjoy her performance in the episodes that we did talk about, and I mostly know her just from Babylon 5. But yeah, it's we just lost a lot of people. You know what I mean? It seems like this lasted a while. It's been really rough. So, obviously my condolences go out to her family and friends, and obviously those in the fandom community that definitely felt her passing. So.
Yes, it's one of those things that's really sad, and it was not COVID related either, which is also kind of interesting. Obviously we talk a lot about the pandemic and things like that, but apparently she actually died from complications from the West Nile virus of all things. So that's kind of crazy as well.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that. It definitely is, but we're not going to wax too much into that because we'll probably get in trouble. We're probably being suppressed as we speak. Just because we brought up the incident.
Yeah, just because I said the wrong word, right? I have to just
said the wrong word.
I tried to correct myself afterwards. Hopefully our feed didn't go down.
You can't say those words, Eric. You can't say those words. Right? It gets us in trouble.
That's right.
Even though we're not talking about politics. How dare you? So, well, and again, like I said, I don't have any pop culture stories, but when we did talk, it seemed like we were going to be treading similar ground. What else do you have for this week's pop culture news segment?
So I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to put this, but I'm going to go get into this because I went ahead and I put this on my Twitter because I always do a tweet before the show and I say, hey, we're going to discuss these things. And, the reason I'm kind of a little confused how to put this is because pop culture generally is stuff, it's either fun stuff or tributes. That's generally what we do in pop culture. It's usually like stuff that's happening at it may be the passing of an actor. It may be a new toy that's coming out. Maybe a new movie. And then in streaming wars, we try to get more into the serious aspect of the industry. And it's more kind of like what I call almost like our hard news segment. That's the way I look at it. And this one I'm about to bring up really is kind of like hard news. But I wanted to bring it up because I promised I would. And it's related to a lot of what we talk about. So we've talked a lot about the state of the theater industry on this show. Okay, we've talked a lot about what's going on with HBO Max and their decision to release their new slate of films for the entire year of 2021, both on HBO Max and in the theater, and the implications of that. We've also talked about Disney, how Disney is not doing that. Disney domestically is not releasing any of their movies. Basically, they haven't committed to releasing any of their movies, until I think around March or something like that, or maybe even May, because I think officially Black Widow is still supposed to come out in May, but I don't think anybody expects that to actually happen. But of course, what this has done is it's severely affected the theater chains, and AMC is the biggest theater chain. Well, something really interesting is happening with AMC right now, and you may have heard about this. So this is a Wall Street Journal article, okay? And it says, live coverage, GameStop, AMC, and other hot stocks soar. It says, stories breaking down the latest moves as nerds versus Wall Street battle plays out in markets. Include a look at how the moves represent a power shift on Wall Street, as well as stories on options driving the boom, professional short sellers facing threats, and a column on how the gains represent a bubble. So what we're talking about here is this bullet point that AMC Entertainment Holdings shares added more than 300%. I'll say it again. AMC added 300%. It says also extending a rise after the movie theater chain said it had raised money in equity and debt to make it through the pandemic. Its bonds also surged 300%, folks, like in a day that this stock went up. Basically, it went up from like $4 a share to $20 a share in the space of like 24 hours. And so this is the reason why this is why this has happened. There is this Reddit group, and I'll put it right up there so you can actually see what the group is. I just lost my my link.
And just to put this into context real quick, and to show how crazy this is, as of December, there were news stories being reported that AMC was looking for more liquidity because they were basically looking at bankruptcy, and this basically has just possibly averted their bankruptcy. But as of December, that's what all the smart people was saying, is that AMC was about to file for bankruptcy and maybe be no more.
Exactly. Yeah, we've talked about that. We've talked a lot about sort of the state of the theater industry, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue, comes this group, and this is it. This is the Reddit. It's called WallStreetBets. And if you haven't heard about this, it's something that you probably need to look into, at least be aware of, especially if you have any money in the market, which you probably do, because if you have a 401k, you technically do have money in the market, right? It's not all bonds, right? So this is something that you really need to be aware of. So long story short, this group, WallStreetBets, they're a group of Reddit users that apparently have about 2 million users, okay? And they range from just the regular guys to maybe some people that have some businesses, or just a big collection of people. And what they do is they try to have fun and make money at the same time trading stocks. And this is basically an old style tactic, right? When it comes to raising the price of stocks, you just go to a bunch of people and you have them buy the stock. That's what they do. Okay. It's that simple. And in this age of the internet and with Reddit, they have been able to get thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not millions of people to invest in these companies that basically everybody that Wall Street says are losers, right? Anybody who knows anything about hedge funds, Wall Street will bet on losers. I've always thought this is an incredibly unethical thing, by the way, and a really weird thing, but you can make money selling stocks you do not own, and then actually make money when that stock loses money. You're probably like, a lot of you are like, what? No, you can do that. You can actually make money off of stocks you never actually owned by basically predicting the price of the stock. And then basically, because the stock lost money, you make money. That's what hedge funds do. That's one of the things hedge funds do. Well, they are having a conniption right now, these hedge funds, these big hedge funds, because of what these guys have done. And they started with GameStop. GameStop was basically the first big stock they went after. And GameStop has not seen the gains. I think that last I saw it was like 200% for GameStop. But that's who they started with. That's what started the whole story. So you may have heard about GameStop and not realize AMC is part of the story. Also, Bed Bath & Beyond. I think another one is BlackBerry, of all things. You know what I mean? They pick these weird companies, right, that are basically failing. That's what these guys do. They'll take a company that's basically falling apart. GameStop is one of them. They've had a lot of problems in the pandemic because people are buying their games online and not going into brick and mortar stores. And they just flooded, the market, by buying tons of GameStop stock. And they've done the same thing to AMC. I just couldn't believe it when I saw this, because I use E-Trade if I want to buy individual stocks. And I could not believe it when I saw AMC. I was just like, man, do I wish I had bought more AMC stock, especially when it was so cheap. I mean, AMC stock, I think, has been as low as like $3. I mean, it's been like dirt cheap. And it's amazing what has happened here. I mean, this is absolutely a bubble. I mean, I think 100% this is a bubble, but it is absolutely amazing what has happened here. And the thing that I'm curious about, and you touched on it, Dave, is I am curious whether this will have any long-term repercussions for AMC, or if this is just going to be kind of a bubble thing. It'll go right back to where basically the price should be, and it'll just be that. Or if it will actually go in the opposite direction, and when the bubble does burst, AMC stock becomes worthless.
Well, and that's the real question of this story, is, what is going to be the aftermath of this? At the moment, it's kind of a fun, interesting thing to talk about, but what happens on the backside of it?
You wish you bought some of that AMC stock, right?
I don't know. But the craziest part about this whole story, though, Eric, is that I was talking to someone about this exact story, and there was the person commenting on what was going on and was talking about how this person actually has this crazy scheme that they do where basically they treat basically GameStop as a bank, and explained how they purchase games that aren't coming out yet, and this whole really weird, complicated thing, and how basically in a weird way they're able to essentially use GameStop as if it was a bank. And I was just like, that's the craziest freaking thing I've ever heard. So, as crazy as this story is, there are things swirling around this story that are even crazier. So I don't know. I mean, they always talk about, people looking for out of the box thinking, well, this is not completely out of the box thinking, but it's interesting, kind of how these people put this group together and push forth this, kind of mission. But I don't know. We'll see what the aftermath is. I just don't want to see my other stocks that are actually long-term investments that I have. I don't want to see those get affected by this, sort of thing that they're doing at the moment.
Well, the interesting thing is, and by the way, it has nothing to do with what happened here, is the stock market overall is down. And that's another reason why these guys are kind of like, hey, look at us. You know what I mean? Because the stock market overall is down right now. And these guys just made a ton of money, assuming they get out at the right time, right? That's always that's always the trick with the bubble, is you need to get out before the stock plummets again, right? And actually gets back to what it's, more or less what its real value actually is, which it's not very much for AMC right now. Let's just face it, AMC's in real trouble and everybody knows it. But it's really interesting to see what these people have accomplished, and kind of the narrative that a lot of people are putting out there. And I don't know enough about these guys to go one way or the other. I'm just sort of just presenting the information. So please don't think that I'm telling you all to go and buy AMC stock. I am not. Okay. In fact, do not do that, I would say, because it's way inflated right now. If you had bought it yesterday, you'd be in good shape. Buying it today, no, not a good idea, in my opinion. Right. And again, I can't give financial advice. I'm just spitballing here. But the thing is that like this is almost being characterized as sort of almost like a Robin Hood scenario, for lack of a better term, because basically what people are saying is people like me kind of feel like hedge funds are bullshit to begin with. The whole idea that you can profit off of a losing stock, that just seems crooked to me to begin with. Okay. It just seems wrong. It just doesn't seem quite right. Hey, and they do it. And there are huge companies that do this, right? What these guys are doing is basically just the equivalent of me calling all my friends and saying, let's do this. And there's nothing that stops me from doing that. And when you talk about, let's talk about like the elites of the elite, like someone like Warren Buffett, right? Warren Buffett doesn't even have to do this, because every time Warren Buffett buys a significant amount of stock, everybody knows it, they see it, and they all do the same thing, right? That's what happens. That's one of the main ways he makes his money, is because he's such a huge, colossal financial force. If he buys a bunch of stock, everybody else is going to do it. E-Trade is a good example of this too, in a different way, because E-Trade has all these different recommendation sites ingrained in E-Trade. It's one of the reasons I like it, right? But I talked to one of my friends who does a lot of investing. And we always talk about the fact that there's going to be an E-Trade bump, right? If E-Trade is recommending a stock as a strong buy based on their quote unquote market analysis, that's going to drive the price of the stock up, right? Because there's tons of people like me that are in E-Trade. So this essentially, at least for me on the surface of it, it's the same principle. It's just guys basically saying, let's buy this. Hey, you buy a bunch of this stock, the price is going to go up. That's just the way economics work, and then they're profiting by it. And I do think that unfortunately there's going to be some backlash against these guys because they showed up the elites. They really showed up the elites that they can play this game, and I don't think they're going to like it.
And I do want to mention, too, it's important to remember that the Retro Rogues Live is not a financial show or a podcast, and you should consult a financial advisor before you do anything, and just keep all that in mind. But it's interesting from a pop culture standpoint, seeing what's kind of going on. And
John says it perfectly right here. And John, I'm sorry I can't pronounce your last name. I'm not going to try because I don't want to butcher it. But he says, don't buy stocks because of a run, and he's right. Absolutely right. Again, we don't give advice, but that is not a statement that you should dismiss. Okay, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, it's just an interesting and a slightly strange news story, and it was weird too because when it was breaking, I was hearing about it primarily from the GameStop angle. And then when you brought up this whole AMC thing, I was like, what? Yeah, and we started getting into it, and I was like, well, that's insane. But
AMC is up more than GameStop, by the way. That's the other thing that's interesting. It's last I checked, it was like 200% for GameStop, and AMC was up at its peak was up 300%.
And there are some news stories breaking that are saying there's some people that believe that basically this sort of bump that they got, it might actually help to save AMC in the long run. So that's interesting because they definitely were in a dire situation. I mean, they were looking at bankruptcy and possibly being no more. So it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, that is the ultimate question, I think, too, from this story is how will this actually affect AMC ultimately?
Interesting. Cool. All right. What else do you have do you have anything else for pop culture news, or we want to go over to streaming wars?
I think we should, with the time, we should probably go over to streaming wars. That's what I'm thinking.
All right. Okay. All right. So we'll just set up just real super quick, but here in the streaming wars segment, we talk about anything that's interesting that's happening in the world of streaming wars. Usually something that's caught Eric's attention or my attention, but at the very least, we hope it's something that we think you will find worthy of discussion. That's what we like to talk about here in the streaming wars. Now, by streaming, what we're talking about, we're not talking about fish and stream. We're talking about primarily streaming video. So we're talking about things, such as what we've already been talking about, things like HBO Max. We're talking about things like, Hulu Plus. We're also talking about things that, may down the road become a big deal like Peacock. That's what we mean by streaming. So tell me, Eric, what do you have up first for this week's installment of the Streaming Wars?
All right. So I like to talk about, as I've mentioned this before, and I don't want to be too much of a broken record, but I do have some time to make up because for a long time, these ratings were coming out and I wasn't even talking about them. And I've been begging for this material for a long time. So I want to start out talking about the numbers, the Nielsen ratings, because we actually have ratings now for the streaming wars, whereas before we just had people speculating and saying they quote unquote had inside knowledge and they heard rumors and blah, blah, blah. And of course, they're all full of crap. But these are actual real numbers from Nielsen. So the numbers we're talking about here are from the week of December 21st to December 27th. That's a very relevant time period because this is Christmas time. This was Christmas time when these ratings came out. And once again, I have to say, I feel so vindicated in the fact that Dave and I crowned Disney Plus as the 2020 winner of the streaming wars because, this is like history right now, I think, because Disney is now, they broke it the last time we talked about the Nielsen's, they had just broken in with The Mandalorian. And now look at this. Disney is number one in these ratings, number one. And we didn't know this, by the way. This is Dave and I just talking about based on what we read, based on what we, the research we do for this show. Here it is in black and white. Disney was number one in this category. And I'm actually kind of surprised because I would have thought it was The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian was actually number 5, which, by the way, that's kind of historic because I don't think Disney has had 2 spots on this list before. Usually this list is all Netflix, okay? And maybe Disney gets in, maybe Amazon gets in, okay, in the top 10. And that's one of the reasons that, I thought Disney Plus was, basically the winner, because they actually broke into this. They actually have been kind of acknowledged as Netflix's main competitor, even by Netflix themselves at this point. But this is really interesting. Number 1 was Soul. Soul was number 1, the Pixar movie that came out exclusively on Disney Plus, at least domestically. It was released theatrically in the international market. But I thought this was really crazy. Did you see this coming, Dave? Did you think Soul would be number 1?
Well, Soul being a Pixar movie, you expect it's going to do incredibly well. But the things that I'm still shocked at that's on the list is number 2 with The Office. I taught The Office last week, and I'm like, what the heck, man? We got that. And that's the thing that kills me is when you look at this list, the older shows that are still putting up numbers that are still charting. We got The Office on here. That to me is a little crazy. We got Grey's Anatomy, and we got Criminal Minds, everybody. Criminal Minds in the top 10. I think that's crazy. But I'm not too surprised that Soul is number 1, partially because, number 1, we had, basically crowned, Disney Plus the winner in our year in review to begin with. So I'm not too surprised at that. And I'm also not too surprised because it is a Pixar movie. So Pixar movies typically do incredibly well. And the only thing I'm mostly shocked at the moment is realizing that I haven't watched Soul yet. So there you go.
Neither have I. I'm actually waiting to watch it with my kids and see what kind of interest they have in it. Because we watched Wonder Woman in my household because Wonder Woman came out the same day. And in my household, it was Wonder Woman that was the winner, not Soul. But not so with the general public, Soul is the clear winner. They're number 1. I think that's really interesting. I personally did not see that coming. But I do think it just reiterates again what we've already said, that we knew Disney is really the one, is really the one that is the competitor of Netflix. And also I did want to mention, because you did bring up The Office, I brought up as my streaming service to watch for 2021 is Peacock, and it's just because of The Office.
Yeah, and also too, we've covered here previously on the show about how with Peacock, eventually there's going to be the new Battlestar series. So Peacock has a lot of interesting things that are going to be coming down the pike. But at the moment, it is interesting to see. It's just always interesting to see this list, and it's curious to see if the strength of something like The Office will actually help, the Peacock to actually maybe even break into this list, right? And actually put up some serious numbers. And if that's true, that proves that age-old adage that content is king. It'll prove it as sure as anything. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Do you have anything else for Streaming Wars that you want to cover this week, or?
Yeah, we alluded to it earlier. I think this is something that you even talked about that might be affecting our content in the future, because we might actually get into this. So for anybody that didn't know, and by the way, I find this really crazy that I learned about this like Monday. We talk about this all the time. This actually leads into a larger discussion because, you and I, Dave, we talk a lot about the weird things that AT&T, Warner Brothers, however you want to refer to that Goliath, the weird business decisions that they make. Now, this is a good decision. Okay, so we criticize Warner Brothers quite a bit, and AT&T, which is their parent company. We criticize them a lot on this show because they make questionable decisions. This decision is not questionable, this decision right here. So this is from Engadget. Babylon 5 Remastered is now available to buy, or you can stream it on HBO Max. And it says the show has been rescanned from the original film negatives, and the SD CGI sequences have been upscaled. And I want to put this out there. I was able to watch a little bit of Babylon 5 before I came on the air because I wanted to see how it looks on my 4K TV, and I have a 4K TV. Okay, So I put on HBO Max, I checked it out, and the way that I got into Babylon 5, as I mentioned, I didn't watch it when it first came out. I got into it fairly recently when it was on Comet. Comet is a over-the-air broadcast like sub-channel, and they had Babylon 5 for like a year and a half, and then it went away, and I was kind of like, why did they take Babylon 5 away? This is why. They decided to put it on HBO Max. And what's really neat is, when we were talking about Babylon 5 versus Deep Space Nine, I mentioned that one of the problems with Babylon 5 is the effects don't hold up very well. It was some very early CG, and they don't really hold up very well over time. Well, that was based on what I saw on Comet. I have to tell you, it looks really good on HBO Max. So I'm going to give it to Warner Brothers and AT&T on this one, because in my opinion, I watched it and on my 4K television, and it looked so much better than what I saw on Comet. I mean, so much better. I was really impressed. And it's funny because they talk about like they upscaled it or whatever. You know what I think they really just did is they just did color correction. They just darkened it because that's what it needed. It gives it sort of more of a theatrical look, and it actually helps kind of hide the very CGI-ness of the effects, and it just looked so much better than what I saw just like a year ago on Comet. I'm just like really amazed by that. But the knock I'm going to give on them is I didn't even know about this until like it came out. I'm like, why weren't they telling us about this? Why weren't they trying to get the Babylon 5 fandom to like surge over to HBO Max? That's the kind of stuff that I just don't get. I just don't understand that. And Dave, I'm curious what your reaction to this is.
Well, number one, I mentioned before, actually in the last segment, and you and I have talked about this before, we have actually reviewed some episodes of Babylon 5 back when the show was only an audio podcast. You can actually, I think, find that episode actually on if you want to backtrack it, you can actually, I think, still find that episode. But what's interesting to me about this is, number one, I was surprised to see that it was remastered. I was honestly shocked to see it on HBO Max. And the way I discovered it is, they have the recommended for you, and so I was kind of looking at some stuff actually over this last weekend, and I stumbled across where it looked like Babylon 5 was going to be on HBO Max. I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I haven't had a chance to watch one of the episodes yet, but I wondered, it's like, Babylon 5 would benefit from that remastering like what they did with the original series. So I'm excited to see that they've done that, number one. And then number two, I've already pitched here on the show live that I would love to actually go back and actually revisit Babylon 5 and actually cover those, some of those episodes actually for the Retro Rogues Live. I feel like it fits into our format. So I'm very excited about this. I think it's very cool. Again, for me, Babylon 5 is going to be mostly new because I didn't really watch a lot of it back in the day. But I'm very familiar with a lot of the actors over time. We talked about one who unfortunately had passed away. But, there's a lot of sort of genre cult popular actors that actually, they kind of broke through and really picked up a lot of notoriety, because of their work on Babylon 5. As in addition to actually some of them actually showing up, like Walter Koenig was actually on several episodes. So I'm just excited at the idea that they've remastered it. It's on a service I already have access to. So I think this is really cool. I'm looking forward to actually getting into HBO Max and actually watching original episodes of Babylon 5.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are, and I don't understand why they didn't promote it more. That's ultimately the knock I kind of give against AT&T is like, we've talked about the strange things that they do sometimes. It's like, I don't know what would be the purpose of trying to keep this as a secret. I just don't get it. The one other thing I will mention is that in order to make it look better, it is at that 4:3 screen ratio. It's not the 16:9, the theatrical style. It's more of that old TV style, CRT style. I think that was a good decision because I did see what they did on Comet, and on Comet, I think it did have that elongated theatrical format, and it just looked bad. The effects, were really bad. I mean, and we're talking about like every single ship, including like Babylon 5, the station itself. I mean, they're all CGI. They didn't do hardly any practical effects on this show. It was all CGI, and so it's like if one of them looks bad, they all look bad, you know. So I do think it was a wise decision, but just a warning to some of you that aren't used to watching shows like that might be a little bit jarring for you on your big screen TV.
Yeah, and then to close out this segment here real quick, I think that John has a really interesting comment there. Says now they need a high-res Voyager. And that's interesting, but for me, I really want to see a high-res version actually of Deep Space Nine too.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I have to agree with you, Dave. John, I've mentioned before, I'm not a huge Voyager fan. I don't hate it. I'm not saying I hate it. I'm not a hater with a Voyager. But you know, I mentioned I didn't really support Deep Space Nine all the way through when it first came out. I really didn't. I left somewhere around like end of season 2, maybe beginning of season 3, because I was like, I can't take this anymore. I really think this show is nowhere near as good as Next Gen. But later on, I discovered season 4 when Worf came and the Dominion War, and I really dig it. And I love Deep Space Nine. And I agree with Dave. I would love to see a high-res version of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, you know, if they did a high-res version of Voyager, I would give Voyager a second shot, John. You know, so I would definitely be interested to actually revisit it. You know, I feel like in the wake of the more recent Trek stuff, which again, you know, I quite liked season 2 of Discovery. I really disliked Picard. But you know, if they were to do the remastered treatment with Voyager, I think that'd be fun. I'd be down for that. I'd watch it. You know, I feel like for me, I'd prefer to see Deep Space Nine. But you know, why not both? There you go. How about that, everybody? Why not both? Right?
Money.
You know, why not?
That's why not both. Money. You can only choose one, my friend. You can only choose one.
Well, I'm more of a, you know, I say why not both. So that's where I'm going to fall on this particular topic. Let's do both. Why not? Let's do both. Very cool. But no, I think this is exciting. Do you have anything else you want to cover for Streaming Wars, or do we think that's good?
Well, John mentions that he says I think fans are trying to remaster both Voyager and Deep Space Nine using neural networks to artificially bump up the res. And actually, John, you're probably familiar. Maybe you're not, but I'm not sure. My understanding is, what's it called? The documentary. I own it. I actually bought it from the late great Aaron Eisenberg. I bought it from him personally.
Is it the things you leave behind or something like that?
What you leave behind. The
what you leave behind
Nine documentary. Yeah. My understanding is they actually did like a fully, re-render a few scenes from Deep Space Nine. So my understanding is that's the only HD footage of Deep Space Nine available. So if you haven't watched that, I think it's available on YouTube. And by the way, that's one thing that we have never gotten around to reviewing, which would be good to review on the show, is that documentary.
Yeah. And John's comment, it's a shame that Brent Spiner isn't here to read it, because I swear that sounds like something Data would have said in Next Gen. Talking about using neural networks to artificially bump up the res. So
soon we'll be using the nanoprobes. You know, then we'll get into Voyager, right? With 7 and 9, it was always the Borg nanoprobes that saved the day.
Right. Oh my. Well, very cool. Do we think that's good, or do you have anything else you want to cover for tonight? Or
no, I think we're good.
All right, very cool, very cool. And like I said, for next week, I'll make sure to actually pull the comics I'm going to show actually aside in advance, because I think that'll be fun. And I'll go through and I'll dig out a bunch of these, Eric, so that you'll know at least visually who these people are talking about when they talk about, oh, I think this is this. I think this is this person. So
I think a primer would be really good, because you have such extensive knowledge that goes beyond anything that I have. That I know there's a lot of speculation about who some of these characters might be. So that might be kind of cool to do a little bit of a primer.
Yeah, I think so too. And then again, whoops, my bad, my camera there. Again, just share real quick. After this show tonight, Eric and I are going to go through the comments, and we're going to put some names into a hat, and actually it's a little Hulk Halloween candy thing, and we're going to pull them out of the hat, and we're going to see who wins this. Again, this is Captain America: What Price Glory. This is 2 of 4. This is actually signed by the legendary artist Steve Rude. This is an original signed comic. We're giving that away tonight. And then next week, we'll probably be doing a sketch card. And again, alternating such on and so forth, signed comic, sketch card, signed comic, sketch card, that kind of thing. So we're going to be doing that for tonight. Thank you to everyone who participated in the Rogues Gallery and commented. We greatly appreciate it. It really helps to make this show more fun and entertaining for us, and actually more fun and entertaining for everyone out there. And John, I appreciate your comments keeping me on point, because, you know, it's weird because I've rewatched a lot of this stuff, but it's like, for some reason, I don't know why. I mean, I know they're the Infinity Stones, but for some reason I keep thinking of the gems. I think maybe the comics at one point they referred to them as gems. But anyhow, enough about that. So I want to thank you for hopefully watching or listening to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty. I have been one of your hosts. If you're curious to see some of my artwork or some of my designs and maybe learn a little bit more about me, one of the places you can do that is actually at Kirby Tees. That's KRBYTS.com. You can see some of the cool t-shirt designs. And I'm going to be actually unveiling some new ones, actually, hopefully next week, that we'll be talking about. Eric's actually already seen one of them. And I think people have hopefully liked those and think they're pretty cool. But you can see that, as well as possibly considering purchasing a Retro Rogues Live t-shirt for yourself and helping to support what we're doing here on the show. But enough about that. I want to thank my great co-host, Mr. Eric Alexander, for always providing his unique perspective. Sometimes we don't see eye to eye, but that's what part of makes I think that's probably the secret sauce that makes this show fun, is the fact that we can have two different points of view and actually still have a civil and interesting conversation. So, Eric, tell the folks hopefully watching, listening at home, where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I'm most active on Twitter. I'm at BassGod14. That's at BASSGOD14. My DMs are wide open. I am always open to suggestions for content for the show. If you want us to review something, hey, I would love to hear some rumors. I always hear about these YouTubers and their rumors, and quite frankly, I always think they're taking, pulling stuff out of their butt. But I'm willing to listen. I would love to have an episode where I talked about rumors from a secret source. So if you have any leads on things like that, we'd love to track them down. And of course, remember, the Staycation Indiegogo campaign, their crowdfunding campaign for the film Staycation, which is the sequel to Routine, a film that Dave worked on with director Russ Emanuel. There's only 3 days left in this particular campaign, so you won't even have to hear me begging for money anymore. But please check it out. I mean, there's a lot of good perks on there. If you're curious about the film, this is a really good way for you to be able to actually have access to it, because we don't know, what the future holds as far as distribution and distribution of the project. So check it out. Like I said, there's only 3 days left in the campaign. It's been very successful, and I'm very proud of it. So, and I'm very thankful to any of you that actually participated in that. And Jane said, "Great show, guys. We always appreciate those very nice comments." And John, I'm going to try. It's John Mastroboni. Am I close, John? John Mastroboni. And he also said, "Great show, guys." And we really appreciate your comments. I want to say that very much. That we very, very, very much appreciate your comments. And with that, we will give you the last word.